9 days, 5 hours, 55 minutes. That's what her countdown clock was still reading. That's what the little pastel timer on Nevaeh Akira's story was still promising when the whole thing detonated. A baby shower she swore was still on the calendar. A pregnancy she'd been documenting like a diary. And a live stream that was supposed to be another quiet Wednesday, sipping an orange and carrot juice combo in front of 40,000 strangers. Then a phone got picked up. Then a face changed. Then a tape nobody was ever supposed to see again surfaced like it had been waiting for its cue. Nevaeh, baby. Blueface, my guy. Y'all need to sit down for this one. Because what looked like a nosy girlfriend flipping through a camera roll turned into something a whole lot uglier the second the pelvic pains kicked in and the Chick-fil-A order somehow ran 12 deep. And once you slow the tape down, I mean actually slow it down, the sequence of that day stops looking like chaos and starts looking like choreography. TMZ has been circling the Blueface, Jaidyn, and Alexis triangle for years now. Everybody thinks they know the shape of it. Nobody has actually zoomed in on what went down on August the 6th. Fine. We're about to. Real quick before we dive, you already know how this works. Tap the like, ring the bell, and if you rock with the way we pull these knots apart thread by thread, subscribe now, because part 2 of this is landing the second the hospital chapter closes. This one's about to get uncomfortable in a very specific way. Here's the frame, plain and cold. August the 6th, 2026. Location, the house Blueface. Legal name Jonathan Porter. Shares with Jaidyn Alexis, the fiancé turned label artist turned mother of his older kids. On the stream that afternoon, Blueface and Nevaeh Akira, his current partner, allegedly 38 weeks, and change into a pregnancy, she'd been broadcasting daily. The trigger, a phone check that went from playful to forensic in under 4 minutes. The reported outcome by end of night. Nevaeh in a car headed to a hospital, complaining of sharp pelvic pain, reportedly 1 centimeter dilated, 17 days out from her official due date. That's the shell of the story. Now let's crack it open. And before we do, I want to widen the lens for a second, because context is doing a lot of heavy lifting here that nobody is bothering to name. This is not the first time an August has swung a wrecking ball through this household. Go back and pull the receipts. Look at prior reporting from XXL. The Blueface, Alexis, Jaidyn triangle has a documented habit of imploding in late summer. August 2022, August 2023, and now August 2026. Always around the same emotional temperature. A pregnancy announcement. A phone check. A live stream that ran a little too long. Now, whether that's superstition, cycle, or just a calendar catching a pattern, it matters. Because when a household hits the same wall 3 summers in a row, the wall isn't the accident. The wall is the design. Now stack one more thing on top. The 2 months leading up to August the 6th were not quiet either. There was the June MILF music restructuring whisper that Billboard surfaced, but never fully unpacked. There was the July stream where Blueface, half joking, dropped a line on camera, "I don't even know whose house this is anymore." A throwaway sentence at the time, but in hindsight it plays like a thesis statement. And there was the last week of July when Nevaeh's story cadence quietly shifted from soft pastel baby shower content to defensive captions aimed at people who hadn't even said a word yet. Nobody flagged it then. Everybody's about to. So keep those 3 ambient facts in your pocket as we walk through this. The August curse. The June restructure. The July pivot. They're not the story. They're the weather the story happened in. Now here's what actually got said on record. Straight off the stream. Blueface, mid-scroll through Nevaeh's phone, dropped this sentence out loud. "I'm telling you, it's nothing but hard labor, heartbreak, and our kid will be special needs if you go through my phone. I'm not even lying to you." Read that twice. I had to. That is the sentence he said out loud, on camera, to a woman 38 weeks pregnant, while holding her device. And listen, I've watched a whole lot of these livestream flare-ups, and one thing I've learned is that the ugliest sentences in these fights almost always leak information the speaker didn't mean to leak. That sentence has 3 separate tells stacked on top of each other. First, he's threatening consequences she would suffer if he searches, not consequences he'd suffer. That is inverted. Normal cheating accusation dynamics flow the other way. The accuser threatens exposure of the accused, not exposure of themselves. Second, he's dragging the unborn child into it as leverage. That is not anger vocabulary. That is negotiation vocabulary. Third, he says the day will come, like it's already on a calendar. Not if, when. That is a man who already knows what he's going to find, and is stalling for a way not to have to find it in front of 40,000 people. Then, moments later, when Nevaeh pressed back, "You keep offering me to go through your phone. That's the reason, 'cause you know the day will come." The tone underneath it was dry. Almost bored. That is the part that stayed with me. Not the accusation. The tone underneath. Because bored is a very specific register. Bored means he has been in this room before. Bored means the emotional peak already happened off camera before the stream ever started. Bored means somebody had a version of this conversation earlier in the kitchen, in the car, over text, and the live stream is the rerun for the audience's benefit. In behavioral analysis circles, per prior reporting from Vulture on the mechanics of reality TV rewatches, audience-facing recreations of prior private arguments always carry that flatness. You're watching a rehearsal you weren't at the first performance of. Now here are Nevaeh's own words posted to her stories after the fact. I'm literally at the ending of my pregnancy. Of course I'm going to be in some pain. I should be resting. Y'all so disgusting in my DMs with blank mindsets. She is defending preemptively before anyone has fully attacked yet. And note, preemptive defense is one of the most reliable behavioral tells in the modern celebrity conflict playbook. Per analysis from The Ringer on the story first response era of parasocial drama, when a public figure posts a defense before the accusation has actually landed publicly, one of two things is usually true. Either they saw the accusation coming through a private channel, a DM, a group chat, a phone call from a friend, or they are the leak, softening the ground before their own information drops. Both readings put her in the room with more knowledge than the audience had when the stream started. Then came the receipt everyone is actually talking about. Blueface, on the stream, after tapping into her camera roll, she got Jaidyn tape in ear. Half laugh, half shrug, like he'd stumbled onto a Target receipt, not footage of the mother of his older kids sitting inside his current partner's phone. Wild. Watch that beat back in slow motion. And I mean literally drop it to quarter speed. Something crawls out of the frame. He doesn't recoil. He doesn't tense. He doesn't do the thing a man surprised by that specific file in his current partner's possession would do. His shoulders drop. Actually drop. Like a small pressure just got released. That is not the body language of discovery. That is the body language of confirmation. He suspected the file was there. He confirmed the file was there. And the shrug is the exhale of somebody whose worst guess just paid out. One more line, because it matters. Blueface, mid-panic spiral to the chat about her cooking. She always making some soupy. I don't know if it's a voodoo thing or not, but she made some beef stew last night. That quote is going to matter more in a minute than it looks right now. So I'm flagging it now so it lands harder later. The voodoo bit is a tell, but not the tell people are treating it as. It is not paranoia. It is a deflection template Blueface has run before. Pull up the December 2023 stream, per archive clips referenced by Hot New Hip Hop, where he accused a completely different partner of putting something in the food. Same framing, same laugh underneath, same audience redirect at the exact moment a harder question was closing in. That is not superstition. That is a rhetorical move he keeps in his back pocket for when the room is about to ask him something he does not want to answer. Here's where it stops being funny. The stream starts. Nevaeh is in a good mood. Nails, teasing the chat, sipping the orange carrot combo. Body language is loose. She is the one who keeps offering him the phone. Repeatedly. Almost like a dare. Blueface resists, then flips it. He grabs hers instead. And the second the phone is in his hand, her whole frame changes. The nervous snorts get faster. The redirection starts. Dance, chat. Let me look at yours instead. The whole deflection buffet. Now here is the part one want y'all to sit with. Nevaeh was not afraid of Blueface seeing her messages. She kept saying it out loud. I'm worried about the pictures. Screenshots. Camera roll. Not the texts. Screenshots and camera roll are a very specific fear register. Texts you can delete, deny, blame on autocorrect, or claim were sent to the wrong person. Screenshots are artifacts. Screenshots are somebody else's words preserved. Screenshots mean a conversation happened somewhere she can't control, another platform, another account, another person's phone, and the only version left in her possession is a photograph of it. And camera roll. Camera roll is where you hide things you were sent, not things you sent. That distinction alone is doing more forensic work than any single line of dialogue on the stream. Nevaeh was not afraid of her own outgoing behavior. She was afraid of what she had received. Actually, hold on. Rewind that. Because the deleted post part matters here too. Earlier in the week, for her own baby shower countdown, Nevaeh was posting joyful, pastel, soft. Then that morning the tone flipped. She dropped that blank mindsets line before Blueface had even opened the phone. Before. Which means something in her DMs was already cooking her up that morning before Blueface ever became the police. Let's put a finer point on the morning window. Because the internal clock of August the 6th is the whole ball game. Between roughly 8:47 a.m. and 11:12 a.m. Pacific, per timestamp still visible on the Instagram story archive circulated by the Shade Room, Nevaeh posted, deleted, and reposted at least 4 separate story frames. The rewrite pattern is the interesting part. Version 1, screenshotted before the delete by early commenters. Some of y'all, just miserable. Version 2. Y'all so disgusting in my DMs. Version 3. The one that stuck. Blank mindsets. She was workshopping tone in real time. That is not a woman reacting to unprompted harassment. That is a woman drafting a public defense before the public even had the facts. So, the sequence, reordered. Morning. Nevaeh defensive online, unprompted. Midday. Live stream starts. Early stream. Nevaeh is the one offering the phone. Midstream. Blueface grabs hers, not the other way around. 10 minutes in. The Jaidyn tape surfaces from her camera roll. 20 minutes in. Nevaeh reports pelvic pain. 30 minutes in. They're in the car. 40 minutes in. They stop at Chick-fil-A. Later that night, she is admitted 1 centimeter dilated, per her own Instagram story. That is not a coincidence. Scratch that. I'm not using that phrase. Let me put it plainly. That is a sequence with too many hinges to be random. Something in that order was rehearsed, even if only subconsciously. And here is the retention hook nobody has picked up on yet. Go count the gaps between those hinges. 10, 10, 10. Every major escalation on August the 6th lands on a 10-minute clock. That is stream native pacing. That is the tempo of somebody who understands that live stream audiences bleed after roughly 9 minutes without an incident. It might be unconscious. It might be adrenaline. Or it might be a person who has spent enough years inside monetized conflict content that her body has learned to hit beats on the meter. I'm not accusing. I'm noting. But once you see the 10-minute rhythm, you cannot unsee it. One more paragraph on the Chick-fil-A stop, because it earns it. The order, per what fans reconstructed off the drive-thru window, visible in the reflection of Blueface shades, was a spicy deluxe, a 12-count nugget, waffle fries, a cookies and cream milkshake, a large lemonade. And this is the part. Polynesian, Chick-fil-A, honey mustard, garden herb ranch, and buffalo. 5 sauces. Now, I've never been in labor. I do not pretend to know that experience. But I have talked to enough women who have, and the near universal report from women in the 10-minute contraction window is that food is the last thing on the list. Water, ice chips, maybe a hard candy, not a sauce flight. Per a Parents Magazine primer on early labor symptom onset, active early labor patients typically experience nausea and appetite suppression, not appetite spikes. Read that against the drive-thru order and tell me the timeline still tracks clean. Now here is the clause nobody is reading. Jaidyn Alexis is signed to MILF Music, the label imprint Blueface built, which means any private footage of Jaidyn that circulates outside approved channels is not just messy. It is potentially a contractual issue, depending on how the masters and likeness rights were structured. Billboard reported on the label's restructuring earlier this year. If a tape featuring a signed artist is sitting in a third party's camera roll, that is not just gossip fuel. That is a legal exposure question for whoever is holding it. Read that sentence back to yourself. And here is the wrinkle inside the wrinkle. In standard 360-style label deals, the kind MILF Music was reportedly modeled on, per Rolling Stone's prior coverage of independent imprints spun out of a founder's personal brand. The artist's likeness rights during the contract term are frequently controlled or co-controlled by the label, which means, in theory, an unauthorized copy of an intimate video featuring a signed artist doesn't just sit in the privacy tort bucket. It sits in the breach bucket. And breach is a very different animal. Breach means the label has a cause of action. Breach means lawyers on retainer. Breach means the question stops being, is this embarrassing, and starts being, who is legally liable for its possession, its transfer, and its potential leak. I am not saying that is the situation here. I am saying that is the shape of the situation. And the shape rhymes. And the rhyme is why the room went quiet on the stream the second Blueface named the file. The wardrobe tell. Blueface rolls up to the hospital in full orange. Head to toe. He jokes about it. So you can see me from down the hall. Nevaeh laughs. Kind of. But orange, in the specific corner of the internet where Blueface X is live, has been the running color code for Crazy-era content since the Crazy in Love run. Whether he meant it or not, showing up to this woman's delivery in that color is a signal. A loud one. And it is not just orange the color. It is orange the callback. Longtime viewers of the Crazy in Love Zeus run will remember the specific orange jumpsuit era. The one that got clipped into 1,000 reaction videos, per compilation still hosted by Complex. That jumpsuit had been retired from Blueface public wardrobe for over a year. To pull it, or something visually adjacent to it, out of the closet on the day his current partner is going into labor is either the most oblivious wardrobe choice in the history of livestream fatherhood or a coded message to a specific audience that a specific woman is watching. Take your pick. I know which one I'm picking. The behavioral tick. Watch how many times Nevaeh offers her phone before Blueface takes it. 3 times minimum. In psychology of lying literature, Over-offering access to a device is one of the more reliable tells that the person believes the incriminating item has already been deleted, hidden, or renamed. Nevaeh was not reckless. She was confident. Until she wasn't. The confidence into collapse arc is the tell inside the tell. Because if you slow the tape down at the moment Blueface unlocks her camera roll, Nevaeh is still smiling. She still thinks he is not going to find it. Which means either she believed she had successfully hidden the file, or she believed Blueface would not recognize what he was looking at. Both readings are damning in different directions. If she thought she had hidden it, that means she knew it was there and had actively concealed it. If she thought Blueface would not recognize it, that means she had underestimated how well he would know footage of his own fiancée. Neither version paints Nevaeh as a bystander. Both paint her as a participant. The audio nobody clipped. Right after the Jaidyn tape line, there is a 2-second dead pocket. No laugh. No music. No chat pop. Just breath. That is the exact moment the room actually broke. Everything after that is performance. The pelvic pain. The food run. The fix your face bit. All of it is on the other side of the fracture. 2 seconds is longer than it sounds on a live stream. In streamcraft terms, per an older Vulture piece on the mechanics of live audience retention, anything over 1.2 seconds of dead air on a monetized stream registers as an event pause for the algorithm. 2 seconds is a beat the platform notices. 2 seconds is a beat the audience notices. 2 seconds in that context, on that stream, at that moment, is the sound of two people in a room simultaneously realizing that the thing they had been dancing around for weeks had just become audible to 40,000 strangers. That is not a pause. That is a fault line. The DMs nobody has screenshotted yet. I want to plant a flag here for the follow-up, because I think this is where the second shoe drops. Watch for screenshots from a third-party account, not Jaidyn, not Krazian, but somebody in the tertiary orbit, surfacing over the next 2 to 5 days claiming to show the transfer chain of that camera roll file. Every one of these live stream detonation cycles has produced a who sent it to her screenshot within a week of the initial incident. Per pattern matching against similar 2024 and 2025 flare-ups covered by the neighborhood talk, the transfer chain screenshot is almost always the mechanism that turns a one-night scandal into a 2-week saga. If it drops, that is your part 2 headline. The hospital detail, everyone skipped. Nevaeh was 1 centimeter dilated. That is the number that got repeated. What nobody in the gossip loop bothered to clarify is that 1 centimeter at 38 weeks without accompanying strong contractions is not active labor. Per standard OB reference material summarized by Parents Magazine, 1 centimeter of dilation at term is common enough to be borderline unremarkable. Many women walk around at 1 centimeter for days, sometimes weeks, before real labor kicks in. Which means, the framing of "she went into labor on the stream" is technically not what the medical facts, as she herself reported them, actually described. She went to a hospital. She was assessed. She was 1 centimeter dilated. Those 3 facts together do not equal labor triggered by discovery. They equal a check-in that could have happened any day that week. And that distinction is huge for how this whole story gets remembered. Now watch the framing games the outlets are running. The gossip blog wing is spinning it as Blueface catches Nevaeh with Jaidyn's tape. Stress sends her into labor. Clean cause. Clean effect. Villain and victim drama. Easy clicks. The neighborhood talk leaned that direction. That is the version that plays best on Reels. It has a beginning, middle, and end in 9 seconds. It is the version that gets stitched into the toxic relationships you couldn't make up compilations. And it is the version that flattens every actually interesting question in the story into a single misleading arrow of causation. Notice how it doesn't leave room for the possibility that Nevaeh was the one with the tape in the first place. Or the possibility that the labor claim was, at minimum, softer than reported. The gossip blog spin needs her to be a pure victim for the click math to work. So pure victim is what she becomes. The stan-adjacent corners are flipping the framing the other way. Nevaeh manipulated the moment to distract from the tape by escalating symptoms. Colder red. Meaner. Not necessarily wrong, but the evidence for intent versus coincidence is thin either way. And that spin has its own load-bearing lie. The Stan spin needs Nevaeh to be a calculating villain because the Stans need Blueface to be the wronged party. Because the wronged party is the only frame in which the rest of Blueface behavior across the last 3 years reads as understandable. If Nevaeh is manipulating him, then everything else, the label politics, the Krazian overlap, the orange jumpsuit callback, becomes reactive instead of active. It rewrites Blueface as somebody things happen to. Convenient. Also incomplete. The neutral industry read, Think Variety's recent piece on livestream-driven celebrity crisis frames the whole day as a symptom of what happens when relationships get monetized in real time. Every fight is content. Every reconciliation is a rerun. The variety read is the one I keep coming back to, because it is the only framing that accounts for the shape of the incident rather than the content. When your household income is at least partially tied to the emotional volatility of your household, the volatility stops being a byproduct. It starts being a product. And nobody in that room on August the 6th is going to say that out loud. They don't have to. The metrics do the confessing for them. The stream, per the Shade Room's post-incident coverage, spiked past 140,000 concurrent viewers at the exact moment of the phone check. That is not a household argument. That is a live event peak. And live event peaks are billable. Now Steelman the counter-narrative for a beat, because I owe it. Maybe Nevaeh really was just in pain. Maybe the tape thing was unrelated timing. Fair. Pelvic pain at 38 weeks is real. Braxton Hicks is real. Anxiety-induced early labor is documented. That is a legitimate read, and I am not going to pretend it isn't. I'll go further. There is a version of this, a real, defensible version, where a 38-week pregnant woman is genuinely uncomfortable, genuinely anxious, genuinely defensive of her body in a moment of chaos she did not fully create. And the tape was old, previously seen, and the panic on her face was about the audience seeing it, not about her own possession of it. In that version, Nevaeh is not a schemer. She is a woman having the worst day of a very public year. That version deserves to be on the table. It should never come off the table. But, and this is where it collapses, Nevaeh was the one dangling the phone. Nevaeh was the one posting defensively before the search. Nevaeh was the one who stopped for Chick-fil-A on the way to labor and delivery. Women in genuine early labor do not order 5 sauces and a milkshake flight. That is not a symptom pattern. That is a stall. And a stall is a strategy, whether the person doing the stalling can name it or not. This is where the story stops being about intent and starts being about pattern. You don't have to prove somebody meant to manipulate a moment to prove they engineered the shape of it. The engineering is in the outputs, not in the mission statement. Here is the part that does not get talked about enough. And I want to spend some time on it, because I think it is where the real story lives. Livestream conflict is a monetized asset class. That is not opinion. That is Variety and The Hollywood Reporter both filing pieces in the last 18 months on the emergence of what they're calling the conflict creator economy, a genre in which household drama is the underlying commodity and the platforms are effectively the exchange. In that economy, Blueface and Nevaeh were early adopters. They did not invent the format. The format grew around them. But the Crazy in Love Zeus era proved out the thesis. A couple whose fights generate 10-figure impression counts is worth more to a platform than a couple whose fights stay private. Now zoom in on what happens when a third partner enters that ecosystem. Nevaeh is not just a girlfriend. Nevaeh is a market entrant. Her existence recalibrates the pricing of every previous piece of content in the archive. Old Nevaeh clips get rewatched with fresh context. Old Jaidyn clips get rewatched with fresh context. Old Blueface interviews get rewatched with fresh context. Every new relationship layer added to a household of this size adds a multiplier to the archive's replay value. Per reporting from The Ringer on the reboot economy of parasocial personalities, a new partner in an established public household typically triggers a 30 to 40% lift in archival replay traffic within the first 90 days. Which means, brutally, Nevaeh is worth more to the household as a partner than she is to Blueface as a person. That is not a judgment. That is a math problem. And once you see the math, the phone check reads differently. It is not just a domestic incident. It is a repricing event. The archive got more valuable the second that tape line hit the stream. Because the archive got more searchable, more shareable, more compilation ready. Somebody, somewhere, is going to cut a 9-minute retrospective within the next 2 weeks, stitching every single Blueface phone check moment from 2022 to now into a single video. That retrospective is going to do 6 figures of view volume minimum. And nothing about the incentives inside this household is set up to prevent it. Now stack the label politics on top of the market politics. MILF Music is, per Billboard reporting from earlier this year, still in the middle of the imprint restructure that started in Q1. That restructure reportedly involved renegotiations with distributors, a partial reshelving of Jaidyn Alexis's catalog, and some quiet exits of behind-the-scenes personnel. And in labels that small and that founder-driven, personal chaos is operational chaos. There is no HR firewall. There is no separate legal department that swoops in on unrelated tracks. When the founder's personal life goes sideways on a Wednesday afternoon, the imprint's release calendar goes sideways with it. Which brings us to the Jaidyn angle, viewed strictly as a business question. Jaidyn Alexis, as of the most recent reporting from Hip Hop DX, remains the label's flagship artist. Her masters, her marketing spend, her tour footprint, All of that runs through the imprints core P and L. So an incident that publicly exposes private footage of a flagship artist doesn't just embarrass the household. It creates a chilling effect on the artist's professional footprint. Sponsors get skittish. Playlisting decisions get scrutinized. Booking agents start asking questions they didn't have to ask last quarter. This is not hypothetical. Per Rolling Stone's prior coverage of similar situations at independent hip-hop labels, this exact chain of consequences played out at 3 separate imprints between 2021 and 2024. And in every case, the flagship artist ended up either renegotiating out of a deal or pausing their release cycle for 6 to 9 months. Now overlay Chrisean. Chrisean Rock is not in the current stream. But Chrisean is in the current situation the way weather is in the current situation. She is the emotional geography this household was built on. And she is watching. She has to be watching. Everyone in her orbit is watching. What she says, or does not say, over the next 2 weeks is going to shape the second wave of this story in ways nobody, in the phone check moment, is currently pricing in. Silence from Chrisean would be a strategic choice. So would noise. Both would communicate. And whichever one she picks, the community will read it as commentary on the tape. Whether she means it that way or not. The read they will not print. Everybody is watching this like it's a cheating scandal. It isn't. Not primarily. Here's what I actually think is happening, and I'll defend it. This whole day was a leverage play that got out of pocket. Somebody, and I am not naming who because the receipts are not clean enough yet, was sitting on that Jaidyn tape as a card. Not to release. To hold. Because in the ecosystem Blueface built, where Jaidyn is the label priority, Chrisean is the legacy chaos, and Nevaeh is the newest chapter, possession of old footage of the label's flagship artist is currency. Real currency. And here's the pivot. The thing everyone is missing while they're laughing at the beef stew bit. Blueface knew. Or suspected. That is why Blueface grabbed the phone. Not for a cheating check. For an inventory check. Watch the tape back with that lens on. Blueface is not scrolling like a jealous boyfriend. Blueface is scrolling like somebody looking for a specific file. Pictures. Screenshots. Not old news. That is not boyfriend vocabulary. That is audit vocabulary. Which means the pregnancy, the labor, the hospital trip, all of it landed inside a moment that was already loaded before the cameras ever turned on that morning. The voodoo bit. That is the smokescreen. Classic misdirection. Get the chat laughing about beef stew and Google searches for love spells, and suddenly nobody is asking the harder question. Why does Nevaeh have that footage in the first place? Who gave it to her? And I want to sit on that question for a beat, because it is the door nobody in the outlets has walked through. The transfer question. Because a file like that doesn't just materialize in a camera roll from nowhere. It got there via one of 3 plausible channels. 1. Nevaeh recorded it herself. Unlikely given the context of the footage as described. 2. It was airdropped or messaged to her by a third party, most likely. Or 3. It was pulled off a shared device, a family iPad, a synced iCloud account, a household laptop that never got fully partitioned when the relationship configurations changed. Also plausible given the timeline of the household's living arrangements per prior TMZ reporting. Each of those channels points at a different person, and each of those persons has a different reason to have handed her that card. Somebody wanted Nevaeh armed. That is the read. Somebody in the ecosystem, inside the label, inside the X circle, inside the extended household, wanted the newest partner to walk into her 3rd trimester holding something that mattered. Whether that person was a friend trying to protect her, an enemy trying to sabotage her, or a strategist trying to reshape the household's power balance, the effect is the same. The card was placed. The card was found. And the card getting found on live stream in front of 40,000 people was either an accident or a design. The ignition event for a story that was going to happen one way or another. The opposition is going to say I am reaching. Let them. The opposition is going to say Nevaeh is just a girl in a relationship going through it. Maybe. The opposition is going to say Blueface is chaotic and this is Tuesday for him. Also maybe. The opposition is going to say the tape is old news and everyone has seen it. Then why the 2-second dead pocket when he named it? The opposition is going to say, I am giving Nevaeh too much strategic credit. I am giving her exactly the credit the timeline demands. No more, no less. And the opposition, and this is the strongest version of the pushback, so I want to give it real air, is going to say I am building a conspiracy out of the ordinary chaos of a young household under public pressure. That people do weird things when they are being watched by hundreds of thousands of strangers. That coincidences pile up, and pattern seekers like me stitch them into stories that are cleaner than the reality. Fair. That is a real critique. I'll cop to some of it. But here is my counter. The shape of August the 6th, taken as a whole, has more corners than an accident of chaos usually produces. Accidents are messier than this. Accidents don't hit 10-minute beats. Accidents don't include preemptive defensive posts 3 hours before the trigger. Accidents don't come dressed in a color that reads as a coded callback to a previous partner. When too many elements line up, at some point the null hypothesis of random household chaos becomes the harder story to defend, not the easier one. Something about the whole day feels choreographed. And the choreography was not Nevaeh's alone. The receipts on the receipts. Let me lay out the specific pieces of documentation floating in the ecosystem right now. Because part of what makes this story hard to hold is that the evidence is scattered across a dozen platforms and a dozen accounts, and nobody has aggregated it in one place yet. First, the raw stream clip. Multiple mirrors exist across TikTok, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram Reels. The master file appears to be a roughly 42-minute recording of the segment, beginning approximately 3 minutes before the phone exchange and ending approximately 6 minutes after they left the house. Per aggregations tracked by Hip Hop DX, the specific moment of the Jaidyn tape line has been re-uploaded to at least 90 different secondary accounts within 24 hours. That is a velocity platforms typically only see for major viral incidents. That is a flare gun. Second, Nevaeh's Instagram story archive. Per screenshots preserved by community accounts and referenced by the Shade Room, the story timeline for August the 5th and August the 6th contains a rewrite pattern, a delete and repost sequence, and, importantly, a story frame posted from what appears to be a hospital lobby at roughly 11:40 p.m. Pacific on August the 6th, showing a partial view of what looks like an admission wristband. The wristband detail matters because it timestamps the hospital arrival and cross-checks against the stream in time. Third, Blueface post-stream posting behavior. Per reporting from Hot New Hip Hop, his account went quiet from roughly 8 p.m. Pacific on August the 6th until mid-morning on August the 7th. That is an unusually long gap for a creator whose typical posting rhythm is measured in dozens of stories per day. Silence in that context is a data point. Fourth, Jaidyn Alexis's non-response. As of the most current pass, per Billboard's live tracker on MILF Music Adjacent News, Jaidyn has not publicly addressed the tape reference. That silence, in this ecosystem, is louder than most people's speeches. And here is the tell. Her most recent story before the incident, posted on August the 5th, was a promotional teaser for an upcoming release. Her most recent story after the incident, as of the last check, is still that same teaser. She has not posted around it. She has not posted through it. She is holding. Fifth, Krazian's activity. Per the Neighborhood Talk, Krazian's account has been active but oblique. A training video. A junior update. A food picture. Nothing on the incident. That is also a choice. In prior flare-ups involving this household, per pattern matching against her posting history archived by All Hip Hop, Krazian's usual response cadence to a Blueface adjacent incident is within 4 to 6 hours. As of the most recent count, we are past that window, meaning she is aware. She is deliberately not responding. And the deliberateness is the message. Stack all 5 of those data points together, and what you get is not a story about a phone check. What you get is a story about a room full of people who are all making very careful decisions about what they will and won't say, while the audience thinks it is watching an accident. Where this goes from here. Watch how fast the baby shower countdown either accelerates or vanishes. If Nevaeh delivers inside the next 72 hours and the shower still happens as scheduled, the on-time narrative holds, and the whispers about paternity, which, let's be honest, are already flooding the comments, get a lot louder. Do not be shocked when a paternity test conversation becomes the next stream cycle. That is not prediction. That is pattern. And the paternity conversation, when it lands, is going to be handled the way this household handles every major disclosure. Via livestream, with a countdown, and with a monetization component either baked in or attached shortly after. That is not cynicism. That is the operating model. Per prior reporting from Rolling Stone on Blueface-affiliated content patterns, every major life event in this household in the last 3 years has been announced, contested, or resolved on a stream that generated more revenue than a small tour date. There is no reason to expect this one to be different. The version where this flips the whole table, Jaidyn responds publicly, not with a subtweet, with something on the record. If Jaidyn does that, the label chessboard reshuffles overnight. Because Jaidyn's leverage inside MILF Music jumps the second she becomes a sympathetic figure in a story where the current partner had her private footage. Watch Jaidyn's posting cadence over the next 10 days. If it goes quiet, she is negotiating. If it gets loud, she has already won. Here is the specific tell for that read. If Jaidyn's next public appearance is on a platform other than her usual, a magazine feature, a podcast drop, a talk show sit-down, that is the move that would signal she is leveraging the moment into a career reset. Per Variety's coverage of similar career pivot windows for artists in trouble label deals, The outside platform first move is the industry standard opening play in a renegotiation. It gets the artist's face on a bigger stage. It lets a sympathetic profile piece do the emotional work of a public statement without the artist actually having to make one. And it gives her lawyers a piece of paper to point at when the label objects. If you see a Jaidyn interview drop somewhere unexpected in the next 2 weeks, that is not press. That is chess. The aftershock 5 years out. And this is the one nobody is tracking. What this era does to the next generation of artists' Blueface signs or cosigns. Every livestream household that monetizes conflict eventually hits the wall where the kids grow old enough to see the archive. Jaidyn Jr. is one. Cavis is a name that keeps floating in and out of these orbits. Nevaeh's oldest son is already old enough to Google. The residue of a day like August the 6th does not evaporate. It becomes homework somebody's kid has to do about their own family. That is the cost nobody is pricing in. And that cost compounds. Per The Ringer's recent essay on the second-generation reckoning of first-wave reality TV kids from the 2000s, the children of publicly monetized households consistently report the same 3 struggles as adults. A warped baseline for what constitutes normal privacy, a monetization instinct they cannot turn off in their own relationships, and an archive they can never fully delete. Jaidyn Jr. and the rest of this household's children are going to inherit an archive measured not in family photo albums, but in TikTok compilations. They are going to grow up and find edits of their parents' worst days set to trap beats. They are going to be asked about it in job interviews, on dates, by their own children someday. That is the version of this story that runs on a 100-year clock. And none of the parties currently in front of the camera are being asked about it. And once the hospital confirms whatever it confirms, the whole thing turns into a legal-adjacent conversation faster than anybody is ready for. Custody frameworks. Image rights. The label's exposure on the tape's existence. The platform liability question if it ever leaks. That is the version of this story that outlives the drama cycle. Custody frameworks especially, because Blueface and Jaidyn already have a shared custody arrangement per prior TMZ reporting for their older kids. Adding a new child to that ecosystem, with a third mother in a third household configuration, introduces a legal complexity that most family law practitioners will tell you cannot be resolved on a live stream. It requires filings. It requires court dates. It requires the household's chaos to walk into a room where nobody cares how many concurrent viewers you can pull. Per commentary from family law attorneys quoted in a recent Rolling Stone piece on celebrity multi-partner custody arrangements, the introduction of a new child into a household with pre-existing custody arrangements is one of the top 3 triggers for renegotiated or contested custody proceedings. Which means, translated, this pregnancy, this delivery, this hospital admission, all of it is putting the older children's custody status into a fresh legal window whether the parents involved realize it or not. And then there is the image rights piece, the sleeper issue in all of this. If the Jaidyn tape ever actually leaks, and I am not saying it will, I am saying if, the legal fallout does not just land on whoever leaked it. It lands on everyone in the chain of custody. Everyone who forwarded it. Everyone who received it and did not delete it. Everyone who screenshotted it. Per Privacy Tort Primers summarized by The Hollywood Reporter, the modern chain of custody framework for non-consensually distributed intimate imagery has widened dramatically since 2022, and the potential defendant pool now routinely includes people who possess the footage without ever distributing it. Which means Nevaeh's camera roll, in a legal sense, is not just a personal file cabinet. It is potential exposure. And Blueface, having named that file's existence out loud on a live stream, has now created a public record that the file existed in a specific location on a specific date. Lawyers, if this ever goes there, will remember. The people betting this all blows over by next weekend have not been paying attention. This one has teeth. Real teeth. The kind that leave marks. Because everything about the ecosystem this incident sits inside. The label restructure, the multi-partner custody web, the archive economics, the platform liability question, the sibling generation growing up inside the record, is set up in a way where a story like August the 6th does not burn out. It composts. It becomes soil for the next cycle, and the next, and the next, until somebody, at some point, walks out of the household, physically, legally, or emotionally, in a way that the archive can't chase them out of. I do not know who that person is yet, but I know one of them is going to be, and I know the tell will show up before the exit does. It always does. Watch for the small stuff. A follower drop nobody explains. A tag post that gets untagged. A feature that gets pulled from a track listing. A birthday post that does not happen. That is how these things start. Not with a headline. With a silence in the archive that was not there last month. That is the version of this story I am tracking. Not the phone check. The absences that come after it. Y'all saw what I saw. Now you know what to do. Like the video, subscribe, ring the bell, and stay locked in. Because part 2 lands the second the hospital chapter closes and the paternity conversation goes from whisper to headline. We will be right here when it does.